leka jesla ostudan nuktanito hesti kilo eskia yudan tesko iga ostusawa wozan gisa hanzo zeton. The most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning, and we give you the blessings, and we just thank you for all you have done for the nations and our neighbors and everyone throughout, and just be with our leaders in the United States, our president and the governor. Just be with them, people. And dear Lord, we just thank you, and we give you the thanks for the veterans making it possible for us to be here today as we carry on with the nation. So guide and lead us, and we give you all the blessings. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. This is an opportunity to talk about the Cherokee Nation and the 1872 Goingsnake Massacre. And the importance of this event, talking to Catherine and some of the historians, some of you know that there were 11 men killed in the 1872 Goingsnake Massacre involving the Cherokee Nation and the U.S. Marshal Service. This was the largest single loss of life for U.S. Marshal Service. But not only was it significant loss for the U.S. Marshal Service, but it was also significant loss for the Cherokee Nation. At least 8 of these men killed were Cherokee. It is important that we remember all of those men who lost their lives that day. The importance of partnering with the U.S. Marshal Museum. U.S. Marshal history is deeply connected and intertwined with Cherokee Nation's history. Many Cherokees served as lawmen under Judge Parker in Fort Smith Federal Court. The federal court in Fort Smith has a unique jurisdiction that unlike any other in the United States. This museum will draw a national audience. It is important to note that we partner with the museum not only to ensure the Cherokee story is told correctly, but also because we support the museum and its goal. I remember back when, years ago, I had a good friend named Benny Westfall right there across Fort Smith, Arkansas. It was I think it came down to 2 cities, Virginia and Fort Smith. If you take the river away in Arkansas, then Oklahoma and Arkansas, there's really not much difference. A lot of our people are employed there in Arkansas. My people, my family, were all employed at Baldor Electric Motors, Whirlpool. We were raised there in Fort Smith, Arkansas. A lot of my friends still live there. So the connection and the partnership right here is very vital to us. And that's what makes us so unique here in Arkansas and Oklahoma, because our early jurisdiction, the Cherokees, was there in Arkansas. It runs there from Arkansas, goes almost there to Harrison, Arkansas. For those of you who remember the old 1817 reservation is what some people may call it. There's where we were first removed. And I've got to move on with the agenda here because our principal chief here, I know he's already had a busy schedule with the Veterans Center, and he's able to be here today, taking time from his busy schedule. Also, when he leaves here, he's going to the Gilcrease Museum for another event in honor of the John Ross paper. So we're very fortunate to have a principal chief that takes time, takes his job serious, and he's always on the go. It's nothing for him to call. He may be in San Diego. He'll call it be in Nowata. I know he's in Nowata last night. I don't know what kind of vitamins he's on, but he needs to start sharing those because this guy is always on the go, and we're very fortunate to have someone that dedicates his time to the tribe as he does. So at this time, let's give a warm applause for Principal Chief Cherokee Nation, Mr. Bill John Baker.
OCO. It is an honor and a privilege to be here this morning. Joe talked a little bit about the Goingsnake Massacre and the Marshal Service and that we were involved and all, but let me tell you why. The Cherokee Nation, when we take our oaths of office, we take an oath that we will carry on the culture, the heritage, the history, the language of the Cherokee people. That is our mission. I just recently got back from Tennessee and Georgia where they were doing a monument to Blythe's Ferry. Catherine Gray was there with me and my wife and several others, but we were sitting there talking about Blythe's Ferry 175 years ago, when many of our Cherokees got on that ferry, went across the Tennessee River, and for just a glimpse got to see their homeland for the very last time ever. 175 years ago, and 25% of all of those perished. They got to Fort Smith, and across another river was their home again. So we were at one end of the trail, we're coming to the other end of the trail, and you're going to tell our story. Well, when we went to the other end, we learned things. We're Cherokee. We've lived Cherokee. We've heard our stories. We know our history. We know our genealogy. But we learn things every time we go back to that area. We actually found my great-great-great-great-grandfather's house that was built in 1810. Still standing today because wealthy people from Atlanta got it at the lottery or bought it shortly thereafter, and they own it today. It's a summer house. And I am convinced that with the history of the Marshal Service, so intertwined with the history of the Cherokee people, that story will be told over there. And I'm convinced that many of our people and many non-Cherokees will learn the Cherokee story by visiting that museum, that park, and as president of the 5 tribes, we are very interested in putting up a monument at this museum that depicts all the 5 tribes' association, commonness with the U.S. Marshal Service. I appreciate each and every one of you traveling in here, and I hope you enjoy our Supreme Court building because we were a people of laws. I hope you enjoy visiting our Capitol building. I hope you enjoy visiting our national prison. I hope you enjoy your day in the gorgeous Cherokee Nation and take in the foliage, absorb some of our history, and I'll be to Fort Smith tomorrow. God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you, Chief, for those kind words there. Now we'll move on to the history of the Cherokee Nation Marshal Service. Shannon Buell. The word for marshal or law enforcement in Cherokee is Didanigiski. Actually just means catcher. Catcher if they can catch you. That's the word we use in Cherokee. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our person who we really rely on here at the tribe that brings dignity and validity to who we are here as a tribe. Shannon Buell, would you please come up? Let's give him a warm applause. Right?
Good morning. Can people hear me with the mic? Good? All right, great. I don't like podiums, so I don't like to be behind there. My name is Shannon Buell. I'm the second constitutionally appointed director of the Marshal Service. My title is actually the Marshal. It's kind of weird, and we're going to talk briefly about how we got that name. But let's go back before there, back before the removal. The Cherokee Nation was always a tribe of laws. From the dawn of the tribe to today, we respect law, and we want to follow those laws. Back before the removal, the warriors and the chief developed what was called regulators. They were assigned to go out, protect the children and the innocent, and to arrest and bring to justice those who would do the tribe harm. Let's fast forward after the removal, and we changed a little bit after the removal. We became what's called light horse or light horseman. The light horse was a kind of the military arm of the Cherokee Nation at that time. It had a lieutenant, it had a captain, and it had a kind of a quasi-director that led that. And they pretty much did the same thing that the regulators did before the removal. Okay. Then just after the Goingsnake incident, the Cherokee Nation created the National Prison, which I think you'll be seeing today, and some of our history is definitely in the Cherokee Prison. And they created the High Sheriff at the time. Now, the High Sheriff's responsibility was to manage and control the National Prison. And then he had deputies that would go out in the Indian Nation and work. Now, how he got these deputies was they were pretty much the toughest individuals in that community at the time. So if I was up in Kenwood, up in Delaware County, and I was pretty much the toughest guy in Kenwood at that time, I became that deputy. Okay? If I was down here in Tahlequah and I was kind of the toughest person down here, I would now be the deputy here. So they had deputies throughout Indian nations, and those deputies actually started working hand in hand with the U.S. Marshal Service out of Fort Smith. That is kind of where we got our name from. Ross v. Neff is a 10th Circuit court decision out of Denver. What happened was Ross was a Cherokee. He's down at Greasy Ballpark. Greasy Ballpark is over in Adair County, and he's kind of intoxicated. And it's Indian country. He causes a ruckus, and Adair deputy sheriff goes out to make an arrest on him because at the time, in 1986, Cherokee Nation did not have law enforcement. Okay? In 1937, I'm going back and forth a little bit, but in 1937, Congress asked a question of Indian nations. They said, can Native Americans govern themselves? This was in 1937. Well, the Cherokee Nation took that as saying, well, we can't govern ourselves if Congress is asking that. So we kind of stopped law enforcement within the Cherokee Nation in about 1937. It went to the 5 civilized tribes in 1907 for a little while, but that's another topic. So in 1986, Mr. Ross gets shot in the leg by this Adair County sheriff. They take him to jail, they patch him up, and then Ross sues because he says that Adair County sheriff did not have any jurisdiction on Indian country. The 10th Circuit said, you're absolutely right. Adair County Sheriff did not have jurisdiction on Indian country. That is the jurisdiction of the Cherokee Nation. At the time, the Cherokee Nation said, wow, I like that idea. Let's revamp the tribal court system, which they did. They implemented the Cherokee Nation Code Annotated. That is our book of laws. There's 2 of them. It actually, in 1989, when this happened, when we created this, they took the Oklahoma criminal statute book and copied it, and now we had the Cherokee Nation Code Annotated. So in 1989, if you were a law enforcement officer in the state of Oklahoma, you could have came right over here and did Indian country police work, and you wouldn't have to learn any other laws. Public drunk in the state of Oklahoma was the same statute as public drunk in the Cherokee Nation in 1989. So thus, the tribe decided, let's form a law enforcement to patrol the 14 counties, 9,000 square miles in eastern Oklahoma. So Wilma Mankiller was the principal chief at the time. She got some people together and they created a law enforcement entity. And I know that they looked at the time, what do we call this new entity? The Creeks had the Light Horse, Tahlequah was Tahlequah Police Department. You had all these names that were being thrown around. And one person said, let's name us the Cherokee Nation Marshal Service in honor of not only those U.S. Marshals that died in Indian country at the turn of the century and before, but also that relationship that our High Sheriff and our deputies and our Light Horse had with the U.S. Marshals back in the day. And we said, yes, absolutely. And that's how we kind of got the name Marshals. Like I said, I'm the second constitutionally appointed Marshal for the Cherokee Nation. I'm nominated by the Principal Chief and then confirmed by Council. And then I hold a term of office for 5 years. The election process for the the Principal Chief of the Cherokee Nation is 4 years. So we did that on purpose, when I say we, the tribe, that the Marshal would go 1 year past the next election. So hopefully the Marshal can stand away from the tribal politics and look at law as it should be looked at. And that's kind of how we do this. Now let's fast forward to today. We started out really small, like any agency would, and we had a huge amount of territory to cover. Like I said before, 14 counties, 9,000 square miles. If you look at the map of Oklahoma, if you go up I-75 out of Tulsa straight to Kansas, take a right, go to Missouri, take another right, go down to Fort Smith, take another right, and come up 40 to the Muskogee Turnpike back to here, that chunk of land is what our jurisdiction is. Huge chunk of land. I can tell you today we have 35 sworn marshals for 9,000 square miles for 14 counties. Not a lot of marshals. To be a marshal now, it's different than even whenever I started 13 years ago. There's a hiring process that's very rigid. Background checks, physical fitness, you name it, we do it. My marshals go to FLETC, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. We do not go to Glencoe where the U.S. Marshals go. We go to Artesia, New Mexico, to the BIA Indian Police Academy. My first experience with tribal law enforcement was in 2000, fresh out of the military. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I moved here with my wife, and I didn't know what to do after 14 years in the military, except they had something called the Marshal Service for Cherokee Nation, and I asked one of them, I said, do you get to carry a gun? They said, yeah. I said, oh, okay. Do they give you a car? Yeah, oh, I like that idea. Do you get to drive fast? And they said, absolutely. I said, that's the job I want. Other than that, I did not know what I was getting involved in. Started in 2000, went to FLETC. And FLETC and Artesia, has anybody been to Artesia? So FLETC? You walk in the front gate, and there's a memorial wall for officers killed in the line of duty in Indian country. Now, I know FLETC at Glencoe has a wall, D.C. has a wall, but this one is specifically for tribal and BIA officers killed in the line of duty in Indian country. And I looked on that wall, first day I was in FLETC, and there are 9 Cherokee Nation law enforcement officers on that wall. And I went, wow, that's sobering. And most of those officers were killed in the late 1880s. Started about 1884, went a little longer than that. Now, we've only had one marshal killed in line of duty since statehood. That was in 2001. One of our marshals was going to a drug informant meet on a motorcycle and had a motorcycle accident and died. But so we've been very fortunate that those tallies that happened for about a 15-year stretch, if you can imagine losing 8 in about 15 years. And that's the ones that FLETC has on the wall. That's not all the other ones that we could probably find. So now we fast forward to today, and we're very fortunate to have the agency that we have in the support of the Cherokee Nation. Currently, we have a patrol function. You will probably see some of my guys out while you're out and about today. They wear a uniform. They have a badge. Our badge, go up and touch it. It's kind of cool. The Cherokee Nation's badge is actually one of the most sought-after badges on the secondary badge market. It has been since I've been a marshal, and when I took over, made out of 100% silver. It's not tin, it's not pewter, it's not pressed metal. It is handcrafted out of solid silver. So if you see one of my marshals out, go up there and touch his badge because they have to polish it, and then they get really cranky if you tarnish it. But it's kind of a cool thing to do. But ask those marshals what they think. Our patrol section does 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just like wherever you live, your local police department. That's what we do. The only difference is, besides let's say you live in Tahlequah, if I'm a Tahlequah police officer, I don't have to worry about the laws of Tahlequah in the state of Oklahoma. Now I'm a marshal for Cherokee Nation. I have to worry about the tribal law, depending on where I'm at and who I'm dealing with. I have to worry about Tahlequah's laws. I have to worry about Oklahoma's laws. And I have to worry about the federal law. So my marshals will either be in court with the tribe, or in state court, or in the Eastern Federal District in Muskogee, or in the Eastern Federal District in Tulsa. I can tell you I've worked in investigations for about 6 years, and I'd lived in the Northern District Courthouse up in Tulsa. I lived there. I was there more than I've ever wanted to be in my life. We have a active SWAT team. I know the U.S. Marshals, those of you who have retired or are still active, you have a SOG group, a very good special operations team. We have one ourselves that's N2A accredited. Last year alone, we did 56 high-risk warrants, 2 hostage rescues, and about 6 armed and barricades just last year. We do this because we have cross-deputization agreements with, I think we're up to about 46 different agencies now. So if you're in Pryor, Oklahoma, or let's say Salina, Oklahoma, and they don't have a SWAT team and something goes bad, Salina PD will call us. We will go up there and we will do what we need to do as special operations for that agency. So most of our call-outs, when I say we had 56 call-outs last year alone, I don't want you to think that Indian country is that bad, because it's not. Most of it was for non-Indian stuff that happens. We have a narcotics team. We actually have one officer on the U.S. Marshals Violent Crime Fugitive Task Force, whatever that is, in Tulsa. He's been on that about 3 years, really likes it. Our narcotics team goes all over the place. We have DARE. So, we go in and we talk to kids about drugs. We have a bike team. We have a nationally certified dive team that uses all commercial supplied diving equipment. They search for bodies. We're kind of the home of a lot of lakes and a lot of rivers. And we usually do between 5 and 10 recoveries a year for people in this area. We have an investigation staff. Our investigation staff has 5 investigators in it, so they don't get to specialize much. It's just kind of general investigations. So one day they might be working a burglary in Kenwood. The next day they could be working a homicide. So it just depends on the call the day on what happens. But generally that's where we're at. So if you can kind of imagine, especially those of you who are in law enforcement, if you can imagine how many people it would take to run an organization for 9,000 square miles, we don't have a lot of marshals. But I hate to say this, we like it like that. I think that's why we like the term marshal. We like to go out by ourselves. We don't like people riding with us. If I can't even now go out and ride with my guys because they get paranoid and stressed, and they don't want anybody in the car with them. They don't want cameras in their cars like most police officers. They don't want, my guys will have backup that's, an hour and 15 minutes away. You might as well say you don't have backup if it's an hour and 15 minutes away. But my guys and gals, that's kind of what they like. We recruit from everywhere, Tulsa County, Tulsa PD, you name it. We're always looking for good men and women to come to our agency. But we do that caveat of, if you worked at Tulsa County and you had backup that was 2 minutes away, don't be used to that, because you won't get it here. You're your own boss. You have to decide your fate in very, very obscure places within eastern Oklahoma. There's places my officers go daily, every day, that their radio does not work, that a cell phone does not work. They will stop at the end of where the coverage is and radio if they'll be in that area for the next 2 hours, and you do not hear from them. You can't contact them. They can't contact you until they come back out of that area. That's kind of the realities that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So, are there any questions that you might have of me or my agency? If you're out today, you can also go by the Marshal Service office if you want. Stick your head in, gripe at us, do whatever you need. If you want to see some of the equipment that we bring to bear, that's great too. Anybody that's a patch collector, I can try to facilitate that at lunch, but we don't have a lot of them. Sorry, nobody gets a badge. We can't do that. We actually regulate our badges more than we do our guns, I think. If you lose a gun out on shift, you have to file out a report. If you lose one of our badges, it's like a whole internal affairs investigation, and we have to bring in the FBI from Dallas or whatever. So, any questions? Yes.
Yes, I'm a badge collector, so when was the last time you were under investigation?
Yeah, we don't sell those badges. I was actually at a gun show. I'm a cop. We like guns. When I was at a gun show, and a person seen my wallet badge, and the wallet badge is thinner than the normal badge, but it's still made out of solid silver. A Hopi Indian builds the wallet badges. And from across the room, I guess this person seen my badge when I was getting my money out and came over and asked, "Is that one of those Cherokee badges?" And I said, "Yes." They said, "Would you like to sell it?" I said, "No." They said, "I'll give you $1,000." I said, "That's not worth me going to jail, so no." So we've only had, I've been here 13 years, going on 14. We've had one badge lost in the whole time. It was lost in Tulsa in a foot pursuit. A guy lost it. It was returned to us 4 years later with his handcuffs. He lost his badge and his handcuffs in a bush, didn't know where he lost them. But they were returned to us about 4 years later. If you retire from the Marshal Service, we give you one badge and you get a plaque, and then we super glue the thing to the plaque. But Marshals get two badges. They get a wallet badge, and then they get their badge that goes on their uniform. So. Yeah, we don't lose a lot of badges here at the we get really cranky if those get out.
Do you have so few marshals because of financing?
Well, I wouldn't say solely financing. Granted, now I can get up here and be real proud and say we're the oldest law enforcement entity in the state of Oklahoma, and technically we are, because the Cherokee Nation had law enforcement before the state was a state, so that's cool. The only one that had it before us was you all. But I'd have to contest that we were here first, because I don't think you was with us when we crossed the river. So thus, I think I might have you by maybe just a little bit.
Don't be so sure.
That's right. But that's always a running joke with Oklahoma, because we're always, OSBI, Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigations, Cleat says, is the oldest law enforcement entity for the state of Oklahoma. So we'd like to argue that point a lot. But besides that, we're actually a very, very new agency. If you kind of look at our history, 1990 was pretty much the start of the Marshal Service in its present-day form. So you compare that to your local city, how long your city has been in. So I don't know if it's necessarily a budgetary issue as it is just a physical issue to get us to where we need to be. We need, the BIA came in 2 years ago and said at a minimum we need to be at 76 men or women. More importantly, we should be at about 225. Well, I hate to tell everybody in the room, and those of you in law enforcement know this, if the chief came to me today and said, "I will give you the money for your 76 guys to meet that minimum, go find them." Can you go find qualified people and then have them trained and then equipped? It's a mechanism of it is new. I expect that we'll be larger. We're larger today than we were 5 years ago. We're larger 5 years ago than we were before. If you come back in 5 years, we will be larger than we are now. So I cannot say it's just a budgetary issue. It's more convoluted than that. How's that? I wish I could say it was just money, and then I'd go to council and I'd go, "Can I have more money? Can I have more money?" But it really isn't. So, all right. Any other questions?
What type of qualifications do they have to have?
Okay. They have to be able to walk and chew gum. If they can do that, then we're good. To be a deputy marshal, we have deputy marshals, we have sergeants, we have lieutenants, captains, deputy director, and then myself. To come in as a deputy marshal, you have to have 36 hours of college. Of course, no criminal record. But the first thing they do, they apply through our human resources. Then they send us a list. I don't read the list. One of my lieutenants reads the list. The first thing they do is they come in and they take a physical fitness exam. It's the same exam that most agencies have. It's bench press so much, a flex test, running a shuttle run, and then a 1.5 mile run at the end. Where we differ from the federal agencies is if you do all that and you pass, you move on to the next section. That's not how we do it. You not only have to pass, you have to be the top 5 people to come out of the physical fitness exam. The top 5. Top 5 go to the written exam. The written exam takes about 2.5 hours, and then the top 4 scores from the written exam move on to the boards. And then we have a sergeant level board where pretty much I try to pick the meanest individuals on our agency to stare at them. And I usually try to pick Farron Pritchett because he's a really good Cherokee speaker, and he only speaks to the applicants in Cherokee. It's kind of cool. You just ought to see their faces go, I don't know what you're saying. And he would just have a conversation in Cherokee, and it's really neat. And we do that because we want to see the faces. I am not a Cherokee speaker, but I don't get shocked if somebody's speaking Cherokee to me. And we don't want people that go, what? We want people that see that. We have communities out there right now that they only speak Cherokee. It's tough for us to come in and try to help if we can't even speak their language. So it's important to us that if we don't speak it, that we at least have the empathy to try to make those language barriers work. Bring in an interpreter. Bring in a family member that speaks Cherokee and English. So they get past the sergeant board. The sergeants, actually that's, Joe, come on down here a second. I want to pull him out. Marshals do not like to get out in front of people. This is Joe Rainwater. He is a sergeant with the Marshal Service. Me and him actually started on the same day. We ran the PEB together. He ran it much faster than I. How's that? But this is the uniform that I was talking about, the badge. If you want to touch his badge, that's cool. Just go up there and just rub it. But he's kind of the modern marshal that we have today.
He looks so
He's a veteran. He's actually our sniper team commander for our SWAT team. And he's the day shift patrol sergeant, right?
Yes.
So he wears many hats. He's also over the bike team because he's still in shape, so that's why he gets to do the fun stuff. But our marshals wear many hats. One, right now he's patrol, or he could very much go into SWAT applications, or he could go on the bike team, or he could do investigations. They do a lot of stuff. We just have to with the numbers that we have. Thank you, Joe. Yes. I couldn't give you the number, but it's close to 70-75% of our marshals are veterans. We have 2 female marshals. We actually like females in the Marshal Service. And one of our females is also a veteran. She's actually a combat veteran from Iraq. Go ahead.
With speaking the Cherokee language,
yes.
Is part of your, as you become marshals, then do you work at learning the language?
Yes.
To be able to communicate? Or
the Cherokee Nation has an incentive program to be Cherokee speakers. We, as well as a lot of Indian tribes, are losing our language at an astonishing rate. Let me back up for me. I was born and raised in North Tulsa. That's where I went to McLean, and then I ended up at East Central. I knew I was Cherokee because I broke my shoulder, my clavicle, and dislocated my shoulder. My mother drove past like 4 hospitals to get me to Claremore Indian. That's kind of the reason why I knew I was Indian. But I didn't really know what it was to be Cherokee till, quite frankly, I moved here and became a marshal. So we understand that we're losing that language, and we as a tribe understand that. So there's my guys go through a 40-hour Cherokee immersion where literally you go in there the first day and they speak Cherokee to you, and you're like, I don't know what you're saying, you know. I'll give you, I hate to tell on myself, I spent a year in southern France during Bosnia and Croatia in the military. A year. I can't speak a lick of French. And I spent a year in a place called Istres outside of Marseille, France. I don't have that ability. I barely speak English, let alone. So I've been to the immersion class twice. I've failed it twice. But it is my greatest hope that someday I will be able to speak Cherokee. I'd love to listen to Farron. He can speak Cherokee. I don't know if he's really saying it or just making fun of me, but Cherokee is a beautiful language. Joe is a Cherokee speaker. It is wonderful to hear our ancient language when it's spoken. Just fantastic. So we promote that. We actually pay incentives if you become a Cherokee speaker because it benefits us. Now I don't have to find a family member. I don't have to find an interpreter. I got a marshal that can sit there and speak the language. So, all right. Oh, I'm sorry, back on you. So they have a sergeant's board. They can send 0 up to the command board or up to 3. So we started with the top 5, then we went to the top 4. Now we have the top 3 that come to the command level board. Then once the command level board decides, yes, you're who we like, then we start the background checks. It's different than like the U.S. Marshals. U.S. Marshals, you apply. That's one of the first things they do once you pass the quals is do your background. Well, we don't do it until the end. It costs a lot of money to do that high level of background because my marshals have to be able to carry an SLEC, Special Law Enforcement Commission, through the BIA. So that means we have to pass the same background as a BIA special agent. So we have to do the same background as that. Very expensive, very time consuming. So we want to make sure before we start that process that this individual really wants to be here, because I promise you, and yes, Joe, he's been on the boards, you have to really want to be here to make it past them. I mean, it is a brutal experience that I wouldn't wish on anybody. How's that? So once they get on, we get them a FLETC date. They go to FLETC, it's 4 months of training. Then they come back and they have 4 months in the FTO, field training, where they're evaluated during their field exercise. And then they become a patrol marshal. We put them on a shift, whether it's day shift, evening shift, or midnights, and that's how they start their career. So to be a sergeant, you have to have 64 hours of college. To be a lieutenant and above, you have to have a bachelor's degree. And by Constitution, my position, you have to have a bachelor's degree. The 2 qualifications for me, the marshal, is you have to be Cherokee and you have to have a degree. That's the 2 constitutional requirements that you have to have. So.
Did you establish these rules for them to become?
Oh, no, I did not. Now, I established the hiring process. Each marshal that comes in, Sharon Wright was the first constitutionally appointed marshal. She was right before me. She was actually a captain when I got on, when I was hired on. The hiring process was a little more lax back then. Pretty much if she liked you, you got on. I really don't like important people calling me that their nephew wants to be a marshal and please, 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 can you put them on? I don't care for that. So as soon as I got on 2 years ago, I established a very rigid application process that I'm out of it. You know, so if an important person comes to me and says, little Johnny wants to be a marshal, I get to look at him and go, well, little Johnny better run fast, push a lot of weight, and be very smart. Because that's the only way little Johnny's going to become a marshal now. Okay?
What was the criteria back in 1886?
Pretty much, I think it was, if you were about the toughest guy in your community, you got the job. I mean, that's, you know, a lot of the tribes, especially the Cherokee Nation, we started out with kind of a clan law enforcement culture. What that means is if I went and did harm against you, your family, the family of the victim, would get to do bad stuff to me. And that's kind of how we did it until right before the removal. It was more of a clan/blood law. And if you notice, it's not a Native American cultural issue. This is also, it's an ancient cultural issue. If you look at the cultures in the Middle East, I got to spend some lovely time in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Yemen. And I say that seriously, I really enjoyed it. Except for the stifling heat, it reminded me a lot of American Indian tribal culture. Very family-oriented. The honor was around the mothers. The different clans or the different tribes or the different Bedouins would enact that justice on the people that do them harm. So it's kind of a concept that a lot of the ancient people of the world share. It's kind of nice. Also, the Cherokee Nation does a more holistic approach to our criminal justice. You know, I'm actually on a task force right now that was started with the previous Secretary of State, Charles Head. It's called the One Fire Task Force. We look at domestic violence in a holistic approach, not just arrest the bad guy, take bad guy to jail, let the spouse go bomb the bad guy out, and the bad guy goes home and abuses his spouse or her spouse. We look at mental health issues. We look at drug and alcohol dependency. We look at child support issues. We look at everything. As a tribe, we're looking at this criminal act as a tribal issue, not a criminal justice issue. And I think that is lacking in our communities, in our towns, and our cities around the nation. You know, if I went to, let's say, Smith, Oklahoma, and I asked their law enforcement, what do you do on domestic violence? Well, I'll go take them to jail. Okay, then what happens? They don't really know. Well, we're kind of pioneering this holistic approach to law enforcement, to the criminal justice system as a whole, to a tribal culture as a whole. We're not inventing this stuff. Our ancestors have had this for hundreds of years. We're just finally bringing it forward and saying, hey, your form of law enforcement has not been working. You know, the jail rates are astounding. You know, those of you in the room that are U.S. Marshals, you know, a lot of the U.S. Marshals' job in Oklahoma right now is either protecting the courts or prisoners. I mean, I know that there's U.S. Marshals here that I'm good friends with that would much rather be doing other stuff, but they're inundated with the prisoner load that this country's looking at. We as a tribe have looked at that and want a more holistic approach to law enforcement. When you go to the museum later today, please look at some of the stuff that we used to do. It was even holistic back in the day. So I hope that we're able to bring that forward to this time. Okay.
Do the other tribes have the kind of organization you've got, like the Choctaw?
Yes, the Chickasaws have a really proactive law enforcement department. The Choctaws do, Chickasaws. The Creeks have the Light Horse. They kept their name as Light Horse. A lot of the larger tribes in Oklahoma do have law enforcement. All right.
The Cherokee Nation Marshals are cross-deputized, right?
Yes.
So you have jurisdiction to enter land that is not under the jurisdiction of the Cherokee Nation?
Yes, we do. Yes, depending on if we're crossed in that county. You know, let's take Tahlequah. If my marshal is in downtown Tahlequah, no Indian country, we have a cross-deputization with Tahlequah Police Department, so he can act as a Tahlequah police officer. He also is cross-deputized with Cherokee County, so he can act as a county sheriff. Then he's also crossed with the BIA, so he can also work federal issues. The BIA's federal issues on Indian country. That's the only difference. Now we have two Cherokee Marshals that are Special Deputy U.S. Marshals, and all that is, well, we have 8 of them. I'm sorry, let me back up. We have 8 of them that have that, but only for Claremore Indian Hospital up in Claremore, Oklahoma. It's a federal enclave, so that means the only people that can go on there to enforce law enforcement are the FBI or the U.S. Marshals. The U.S. Marshal out of Northern District, Clayton Johnson, gave us that special deputization solely for Claremore Indian Hospital. So I hold that deputization, but I can't go to Tulsa and use it, or I can't be here and say, hey, look, I'm a U.S. Marshal. We don't have that. It's only so we have criminal jurisdiction that we can enforce on Claremore Indian. But I have two that have a special deputization through the U.S. Marshals that go with their task forces.
So whenever you're acting as a cross-deputized officer on non-tribal land,
yes,
you're enforcing state law?
Yes.
Not tribal law?
Right. We enforce the law that we're under the jurisdiction at the time.
So whenever you're acting as a marshal of the Cherokee Nation on tribal land, then that would be this place?
Yes, it would be.
Or
Yes.
trust land owned
Yes.
by? Okay.
Yep. So that's the difference. You have to know where you're at, where you're standing, and who you're dealing with depends on what jurisdiction. Well, thank you all very much. I'll be around at lunch and then more today. If you need to grab, ask me a question, look at anything we have, we're here to help you. Thank you very much.
Good job, Shannon. I see a couple of former tribal council members that I need to introduce, Melvina Shotpouch and Barbara Starr Scott. Let's give them applause. They're back here. You know, when we're looking to careers, you know, when I was in school, I played a lot of sports. I also looked at maybe law enforcement. You know, it said, do you get a car? Yes. You get a gun? Yes. Well, that's exciting. Do they shoot back? Yes. So I got into education. And I'm glad Shannon Buell took on that task because we need people like him in there. You know, and the question that was asked earlier, do the other tribes do that? Just for your information, the 5 tribes, one's referred to as the 5 civilized tribes, still trying to figure out what that word civilized means. But the 5 tribes, the Cherokee, Choctaw, Creek, Seminole, we meet quarterly. We meet quarterly. And we discuss issues, anything that has to do with housing, education, land issues, law enforcement, everything. So it's that cooperation, collaboration among those 5 tribes that really makes it good for us when we go to Washington, D.C. and leverage who we are, because we make up, I would say, 80% of the total Native American population in Oklahoma. I think we're close to 400,000 if you put those 5 tribes together. So that's a little bit more to your comment there. Deadly Afraid. That's a book written by Mr. Robert Ernest, and that's quite a title there, Deadly Afraid, and that's what I would be if I was out there and have to put up with some of the things our marshals have to. But the 1872 Goingsnake Massacre, an author and historian, we're very honored to have him in our presence and invite him to come up and say a few words. So let's make him feel welcome.
Good morning. Let me get myself turned on here. Whoop, it came off. Everybody hear me? We're here to talk about an event that happened in 1872, a long time ago. And I was sort of surprised with one of the comments that Shannon made about their work with domestic violence. Because this incident actually started with domestic violence. There was 3 principal players that started this whole event that ended up with 11 people laying dead in a courtroom or in the ground. Zeke Proctor. First, I'm going to ask a question. Do we have direct descendants from the federal side that are here? I think so. How about from the Cherokee side? How about some of you are from both sides? The Goingsnake has been called a lot of things. An incident, a massacre, a gunfight. One paper in San Francisco simply stated, Indians kill marshals. I think the more appropriate term would be the Goingsnake tragedy. because it truly was a tragedy. The U.S. Marshal Service lost 8 members, 7 posse, and 1 commissioned deputy U.S. Marshal. It's the largest loss of life that they ever sustained in one operation. And for you that don't understand the term posse, it's not like you see in the Western movies. It's not the sheriff running around saying, "Get your horses, boys, we're going to go after them varmints." A U.S. Marshal posse was a paid position. They got a whole $3 a day. For that, they had to supply their guns, pistols, rifles, shotguns, whatever they wanted to carry, plus their horses. And they had to work directly under the supervision of a deputy U.S. Marshal. That's the only time they had arrest authority. Once their operation was gone, if they would have come up to Tahlequah to arrest somebody, once he was arrested back down in the jail in Fort Smith, their service had ended until that deputy called again and said, "Hey, we got another one to go get." There was 3 people that started this tragedy. Zeke Proctor, better known as Zeke, was born in 1831. He was a mixed blood Cherokee. He was married to Rebecca Mitchell. He had served in the Civil War on the Union side. And he had a problem with a guy by the name of James Kesterson. Why? There we go with this domestic part again. James Kesterson was a white man. We don't really know how he got into the Cherokee Nation, but he showed up. He was married to Zeke Proctor's sister, Elizabeth. They had children. Well, all of a sudden, James Kesterson abandoned Elizabeth and her kids and went to work for a gal by the name of Mary Beck. She had several names. She was married 3 times. So her full name would have been, I got to read this one, I'll screw it up. Mary Beck Downing Crittenden Hildebrand, and finally Kesterson. Now, instead of saying all that, I hope you allow me just to call her by her nickname, Polly. That way I might get through this. Polly, at that time, had been married for the 3rd time to a Stephen Hildebrand. He's the guy that built the Hildebrand Mill that some of you may be acquainted with. But he died in 1867. A mill is a pretty hard job for a woman to run alone. So she had to hire some help. She hired James Kesterson. Shortly after hiring James Kesterson, James abandoned his wife and children and married Polly. So there was I was going to say a little animosity. There was more than a little animosity. Proctor didn't like James Kesterson. So on Tuesday, February 13th, 1872, he rode over to the Hildebrand Mill to have it out with Kesterson. They started just by verbally arguing, but it escalated. And soon, both Kesterson and Proctor were going for their guns. And if we know anything about Zeke Proctor, he was a lot quicker than most guys. But the tragic part is, Polly jumped in between Proctor and Kesterson to separate them, to protect her husband. And when she jumped, it was the same time as Proctor was pulling the trigger. And the shot hit Polly dead center in the chest, and she dropped into the dirt dead. As she was dropping, Kesterson decided he didn't want to be there anymore, and he turned and started running for the mill to take cover. Proctor fired 2 shots at him towards his back. He missed with the first shot, but the second shot wounded Kesterson. Didn't knock him down, didn't kill him, but it wounded him, and he kept on running into that mill. Proctor finally realized what he had done. He had killed Polly. That wasn't his intent. So he immediately went to the Goingsnake District Sheriff, who was named Jack Wright, and he surrendered. Well, back in 1872, there was no Cherokee National Prison. There was no prison in Indian Territory by anybody, the federal government or the Cherokees. So what they used to do, the sheriff would appoint a guard, and they'd send the defendant home under guard, and he'd wait there until his trial came up. For some reason, this trial was delayed for 2 months. And Proctor was charged with murder. So on April 15th, Judge Blackhawk's six-killer called the trial in order. And everything sort of seemed it was going along pretty good. Except Kesterson had ridden to Van Buren, Arkansas, where the court was at that time. It wasn't yet in Fort Smith. And along with him was some of the Beck clan. Because remember, Mary was a Beck. So they were concerned. And they convinced, I think it was the Becks that convinced Kesterson, but either way, Kesterson went and talked to a U.S. commissioner. They're now called magistrates, but at that time they were called United States commissioners. And drew up a formal complaint charging Proctor with assault with intent to kill. And the reason for that was the federal government had no jurisdiction over Proctor for killing Polly. They were both Cherokee. So the federal government had no jurisdiction. But Kesterson was a white man. That gave the federal courts jurisdiction, but only for the assault with intent to kill. So the commissioner issued the arrest warrant and gave it to a deputy United States Marshal by the name of Jacob G. Owens, who had served for several years, was very well respected, and he and his posse were going to start up this way. But they also had the Becks with them. The U.S. commissioner knew there was going to be trouble. So he asked another deputy by the name of Joseph Peavy if he would ride along with Owens. Peavy was in the courthouse picking up warrants to serve in Kansas Indian Territory, north of where the Whitmer School was. So the commissioner said, "Can you travel along with Owens when we arrest Proctor? If we need to, then you can leave him with Owens and you can travel up to Kansas and make your arrest and then head back." So that sounded like a pretty good deal. Both sides, I think, knew trouble was brewing. There was a Goingsnake courthouse in existence. However, they moved the trial from the Goingsnake courthouse to the Whitmer School. Why? Because there were fewer doors and fewer windows. Theoretically, that would make it more secure. So the trial is underway. The federal marshals are on their way. And both Owens and Peavy gave strict orders to their posse, which was the Becks. Each deputy probably carried their own posse of 1 or 2 guys. But then the Becks were there. And they gave everybody the orders. Once we get to that school or that courtroom, nobody is to approach the courtroom. We'll wait to see what happens with the Cherokee government. If they find Zeke Proctor guilty of murder, there's no reason to arrest Zeke, because the Cherokee government would take care of him, probably by hanging. If he was found not guilty, then they would approach and arrest him for the assault and take him back to Van Buren. Didn't work out that way. As the posse approached, they got off their horses, and this, can you imagine a one-room schoolhouse, which is, I imagine, much less large than this building, or this room. It was totally packed. Outside this schoolhouse was another large group of people. Proctors, Becks, and other factions from the Cherokee Nation. So it was a madhouse. There's 2 versions of why the first shot was fired. And I don't think we'll ever know what exactly happened. There's an old adage in law enforcement, if you have 100 witnesses to a crime, you're going to have 100 different versions of what that crime was. One version says that a shot was fired from inside the courthouse, or inside the courtroom, into the marshals who were approaching. The reason for that is, I'll explain it later, but somebody that was rather influential in the Cherokee Nation was the one that made that statement, and he named the person who incited that shot. The second version is that one of the Becks charged into the courtroom with a shotgun and was aiming at Zeke Proctor. Unfortunately, he hit Johnson Proctor, his brother, in the chest from very close range with a shotgun, which obviously killed him. And also a couple pellets hit Zeke Proctor in the leg. So he went down. And then it didn't matter who started it, because now everybody's firing. You probably had 100 people firing in the courtroom, out of the courtroom. Most of those guns probably would have been black powder back then. So if you can imagine 20, 30, 40 people in this room firing black powder, after the first volley, you probably couldn't see who you were shooting at to begin with. We don't know how long that gunfight went on. Probably not very long. The national average for gunfights is 7 seconds. I think it's 7 seconds. This one probably went on longer, but probably not a whole lot longer. I think most people, when they're getting fired on, have figured out, I'd want to be somewhere else. So you turn around and all of a sudden there's bodies everywhere. There's bodies in the courtroom. There's people dying in the courtroom. There's people screaming in the courtroom. And outside is the same. Now let's talk for a minute about who the marshals were. Jacob G. Owens, if you go to Tombstone, Arizona, and ask, who's Jacob G. Owens? They're going to tell you, he's famous out there. A year before the Goingsnake gunfight, or tragedy, or massacre, Jacob Owens was given warrants for 3 guys for horse stealing. A man by the name of James Keyes had complained to the U.S. courts that he had 2 horses stolen. And he named the thieves. So warrants were filled out. Warrants were given to Jacob Owens and his posse. They tracked these horse thieves for several days, finally overtook them just short of the Kansas state line and arrested 2 out of the 3 men. The third one apparently vanished. And they took them back to Van Buren. And lo and behold, one man was named Edward Kennedy, which, oh well. The second man was named Wyatt S. Earp. His real full name was Wyatt Barry Stapp Earp. He's the famous Wyatt Earp of Tombstone fame. And he had been given a court day in November of 1871, and he jumped bond. Owens and several other deputies hunted for him for many days, 57 days, and finally reported on the back of their warrant he's no longer in IT, in the Indian Territory. You're right, he wasn't by that time in IT. He had gone to Wichita, Kansas, and was serving as a police officer on the Wichita Police Force. So somewhere along the line, he dropped his black hat and he put on his white hat and went to Wichita. Jacob Owens is probably more famous for arresting Wyatt Earp than anything else. I was at a conference, probably 20 years ago, and they were talking about Wyatt Earp. And Jacob Owens came up. And somebody asked about, wasn't he involved in something called the Goingsnake? And most of them out there, this was in Tombstone, most of them said, what's the Goingsnake? Where is the Goingsnake? What happened to the Goingsnake? The second deputy was Joseph G. Peavy. He was a Confederate officer in the Civil War, as was Owens. They were both officers on the Confederate side. He was described as a white man, 5'10", slim build, 130 pounds, obviously a lot thinner than I am. He had dark brown hair, a thin mustache, and was 35 years old. He'd been in the Marshals for several years. He was known as a guy that would take on warrants that couldn't be served by other Marshals. 3 years before the Goingsnake incident, he had been given a warrant for a Kiowa war chief. Previous to him getting the warrant, several deputy marshals and the United States Cavalry Detachment had looked for this war chief for weeks. Couldn't find him. Joseph Peavy started out for west of Fort Sill. Now, can you imagine riding a horse from Van Buren, Arkansas to Lawton, Oklahoma? You probably wouldn't walk real well after that. But Joseph Peavy started out alone, no posse. He was always known to carry at least 2 Navy 6 revolvers. If he thought he was going into a real dangerous situation, he'd carry 4 Navy 6s and a Bowie knife. So he heads off for Fort Sill and for this Kiowa camp. The cavalry knew where the camp was. It was west of Fort Sill, several miles. So Joe Peavy is heading for this Kiowa camp. After about 21 days, the rumors started floating around Fort Smith and Van Buren that Peavy's probably laying in a ditch somewhere, dead. But 28 days later, here comes a parade of horses going towards the courthouse in Van Buren, Arkansas. Leading the pack was the Kiowa war chief on his pony. Next in line was Joe Peavy. And following the 2 of them were 2 Indian women who were wives of the Kiowa war chief. That's the only way that Peavy could convince the war chief to turn himself in, if he could take 2 of his wives along. No violence. Peavy never had to draw a weapon. And I think later the Kiowa chief was found not guilty. So now we have a mass shooting that occurred inside the schoolhouse. And I think there's probably more people wounded than we know about. But we do know that Jacob G. Owens, the deputy marshal, was severely wounded. He was still breathing. He was still conscious. Blacksuck Beck, first name was Jesse, was dead where he had fallen. Sam Beck, dead where he had fallen. Bill Beck was wounded but still alive. William Hicks, dead where he had fallen. Whitesuck Beck, his name was Surrey. He was severely wounded, but he survived. Paul Jones, George McLaughlin were both wounded, but they would survive. George Selvage, dead. Jim Ward and Riley Woods, dead. That was on the Marshals side. Now remember, at least 5 of those people that were involved in this were also Cherokee Indians on the federal side. On the Cherokee side in the courthouse, Zeke Proctor was wounded in the lower leg. Johnson Proctor was dead from a shotgun wound to the chest. Mose Elberty was Proctor's defense attorney. He was dead at the scene. And a fellow by the name of Andy Pallone was dead at the scene. The wounded on the Cherokee side was John Proctor, the judge, Judge Sixkiller. He was wounded in the wrist. Isaac Van, Ellis Foreman, and John Cheney were wounded. When the story started getting around, Mrs. Owens in Van Buren got a hold of her family doctor, and they got in a buggy and started heading for this area, hoping to get there in time before Jacob Owens died. They didn't make it. He was dead by the time they pulled up. So now what happens? You have these wounded people. Mrs. Whitmer, whose husband apparently had been the school teacher of this Whitmer school, and she was now a widow. She commanded some of the people in the area to pick up the wounded and the dead and drag them across the street, lay them out on a porch, and she gave them first aid the best she could until they either were going to survive or they died. Jacob Owens died the following day, as did the Beck, who was wounded. Before Owens died, he made the statement to several people, "I tried to stop him." We assume that means he tried to stop his posse from acting. He also made the statement, as did Joseph Peavy later when he was interviewed, that they believed the first shot had come from inside the courthouse. Well, now the Cherokee government wanted to charge all the marshals with murder because they had invaded a Cherokee court. The federal government wanted to charge all the Cherokees with murder because their posse had been killed and Jacob Owens had been killed. On May 22nd, Joe Peavy and another deputy marshal by the name of Finis M. Shannon, obviously not a Cherokee, I don't think, started out with their posse by the name of John Vanoy towards the Cherokee Nation. They were on a warrant sweep, not necessarily looking for the Goingsnake defendants. They were just on a general warrant sweep, serving all kinds of warrants. And they served all kinds of warrants. And then they were going to serve, I don't think this is too common. The federal court had issued both witness subpoenas and arrest warrants for several of the Cherokees. So they would approach one of the Cherokee defendants' house, and they would say, here's a subpoena for you to appear in Van Buren on whatever date. The next house, they may say, you're under arrest. Well, while they were picking up people unrelated to the Goingsnake, they ran across the Delaware County, or the Delaware District Sheriff, who was in pursuit of 2 horse thieves by the name of Williams and Thomas. And as soon as they spotted these horse thieves on the Grand River, the 2 guys opened fire on the marshals and the sheriff. One of those horse thieves, named Williams, was a 17-year-old Cherokee man and died of gunfire. The other one quickly surrendered. So now they had these prisoners, and Peavy took the prisoners to Evansville, where he waited for the other deputies to show up and go back to Van Buren. The other deputies located Ellis Foreman 6 miles west of Evansville, where he lived, and arrested him for murder. They then went to a man by the name of Starr. We don't know his first name, or at least I don't. Maybe some of you do. He was the clerk of the Cherokee court, and they gave him a witness subpoena to appear and give testimony. They next went to a man's house by the name of Arch Scraper. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, if there's any descendants in the house. He lived 5 miles from the Goingsnake District Courthouse. They arrested him for murder. By the following Wednesday, they rode into Van Buren with 11 prisoners. Some from the Goingsnake, some from others. Ellis Foreman and Art Scraper were held without bond. The other ones bonded out. On June 4th, a federal grand jury met in Van Buren, Arkansas. This is a copy of the docket book from that day, June 4th, 1872. And it charges Zeke Proctor with the crime of assault with intent to commit murder. On June 7th, the same grand jury met again. This is a docket for the Cherokee people who were charged with murder that day. 21. And some pretty common Cherokee names in here. Ezekiel Proctor, Arch Scraper, Tail Six Killer, John Walker, Black Hawk Six Killer, the judge. Joseph Chewy, George Shell, Jesse Shell, Edwin Downing, Jim Beamer, John Walking Stick, John Creek, John Proctor. That was another brother of Zeke's. Mike Mitchell, Thomas Walking Stick, Ellis Foreman, Nels Foreman. That sounds like a female name. I don't know if it was, but it sure sounds like it. John Shell, Isaac Van, Ned Stell, John Looney. And it ends up saying it's a true bill charging murder. Now, Art Scraper and Ellis Foreman were quick on the draw and got attorneys. For just 3 days later, they applied to the court for a delay in their trial. Trial never occurred. In this whole mess, 11 people killed in one incident, plus Polly Beck being killed, as 12 dead people, a whole bunch wounded. Nobody was tried by the federal court. All charges were dismissed. Nobody was tried in the Cherokee courts. All charges were dismissed. I guess you could say it's a wash, but that just compounds the tragedy in my mind. Nobody answered. Nobody found out exactly who incited this shooting. And the reason I say that one person has named a party inside the courthouse that incited the gunfire from inside the courthouse into the Marshals. And that man was the judge, Six Killer. When he surrendered to Joe Peavy, that's the only man he would surrender to. And while they were riding back to Van Buren, Judge Six Killer told him that Art Scraper, the foreman of the jury, was the ones that cried out, "Kill the Marshals." True? I don't know. There's two versions. I'm sure if we reconvene this 100 years from now, there's going to be two versions, and I won't be here, I'm sure. Joe Peavy continued with the Marshals for several years. By 1880, he had joined the Van Buren Police Department as a constable and worked there for another 10 or 12 years. So he probably carried a badge for 25 years and survived. Zeke Proctor did pretty well. In 1877, 5 years later, he was elected to Cherokee Senate. In 1891, and this is the ironic one to me, he was commissioned a Deputy United States Marshal for the Western District of Arkansas. In 1894, he was elected the Goingsnake District Sheriff. And in 1895, he was recommissioned as a Deputy United States Marshal. And from everything I've seen in newspapers, in court documents, he was a very good Deputy U.S. Marshal. He did his job extremely well. Anybody have any questions?
It appears like Wyatt Earp and Zeke Proctor came out okay by being able to take care of themselves, pick on the draw, and survivors, however way you want to look at it, but yet became good law enforcement in the end.
I'd say Zeke Proctor was a better law enforcer than Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp, I've studied him for 30 years. Yes, he was a part-time lawman, first in Wichita, then on to Dodge City, then on to Tombstone, Arizona. And beyond that, he went to Nevada, served a couple years, and then into Alaska. But he also ran whorehouses. Sorry, ladies. He was a gambler? Yes, he was. And in Alaska, he was gold mining plus mining cards. He ended up being a referee in professional boxing fights. So my opinion of Wyatt Earp is not real high. I think Proctor was a better lawman.
Thank you.
And I think he was better with his guns than Wyatt was too. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I missed the other one of the original three. What
James Festerson.
Yeah.
He was the white guy.
Yes.
Mary, or Polly Beck, was the female who ended up dead.
No, but going with the Marshals to Goingsnake, he was with the group, was he not?
Who? Kesterson? That's the funny part. After he signed the warrant in Van Buren, he disappeared.
Oh, okay. Missed that.
Nobody knows where he went. He didn't testify in Proctor's trial. So number one, how could they find him guilty? Because he was the only witness. And he left. I'm sure he saw the writing on the wall that I'm probably not a real popular guy in the Cherokee Nation. I probably should get the heck out of here. And the other reason I think Proctor would have been found not guilty, no matter what. The Cherokee Nation, and I chatted with Shannon about this earlier, we're both of the opinion that the Cherokee Nation at that time did not have a charge of manslaughter. They had either murder or assault with intent to kill. Well, you can't charge Proctor with assault with intent to kill because Kesterson's a white guy, so the Cherokee Nation has no jurisdiction. They only had jurisdiction over Polly's death. And there's no manslaughter. There's no evidence that Proctor wanted to kill Polly. He was aiming for Kesterson, and Polly just happened to jump in front and take the bullet. The charge should have been manslaughter. And he probably would have been found guilty of that. But there was no such thing in Cherokee law at that time of manslaughter. I think he would have been found not guilty if nobody would have messed with the court. And I think probably he would have been found not guilty in Van Buren court, the federal court also. Because where's the witness? James Kesterson is missing. You can't be tried with no witnesses and no evidence. Well, I guess you can, but you're going to be found not guilty, I hope. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Would you agree that the Cherokee response, including the trial itself, was an assertion of tribal sovereignty because the federal court had already attempted to assert jurisdiction over this crime?
Well, not only this crime, other crimes.
Right.
They were always in conflict. In modern day, there's tribes that are still in conflict with the federal government. Many of them. But yeah, probably. But there was two.
Say, though, that the Marshals coming from Arkansas into the Cherokee Nation, regardless of who fired the first shot, were the instigators of this event?
I think more the Becks riding with the Marshals caused the uprising.
Well,
I think if it would have just been Owens, if it would have been Owens and Peavy and their posse who worked with them full time, you could say, I think they'd have just waited to see what was going to happen.
So you don't think that if the Becks had been with them, that the federal marshals would have gone?
Well, how many former or current deputy marshals are in the House? See some hands. When you were working, did any of you ever take the victim of a murder, their relatives with you, and you're going to arrest the killer? Anybody? I don't think anybody's going to raise their hand on that one. That's just asking for trouble.
Well, that proves my point that the federal marshals were out for trouble. They were the ones.
I don't think the marshals were. I think the circumstances were. I agree with you. I don't think they should have gone there.
I would agree with that.
They should have stayed in Van Buren. Zeke Proctor wasn't going to go anywhere. If he was found guilty, he'd be hung. He's found not guilty, he's going home. Everybody knew where Zeke Proctor lived. The Marshals, Cherokees. He was rather famous, even at that time. So if they had just waited, found out what happened, they can sneak in and arrest him at any time. But to walk into that courthouse when there's probably 80 to 100 people around, that's inflaming everything.
That's my point.
Yeah, I don't argue with you on that. The other part is, did Art Scraper holler out, kill the Marshals? I don't know. I wasn't there. Although my son would probably say I'm old enough to have been there, but unfortunately he's wrong. Yes, sir.
Well, you know, most of the Marshals were not given a choice of when to go arrest somebody. When the judge gives
if a federal judge gives you a warrant, you have to serve it. That's right.
You're duty bound to go get them.
And obviously, there was a policy. Normally, you gave a warrant to one deputy, and he would take his posse with him. Most of them carried a posse of 2 to 3 guys. One would act as a cook and to guard prisoners. The other ones would go with the marshal to make the arrest. But now you had the Becks rolling along with them. The U.S. commissioner, I think, knew exactly what was going to happen. or he wouldn't have sent Joe Peavy with Jacob Owens. Why? He's cutting his resources in half. Peavy was supposed to go to Kansas Indian Territory to make arrests. Owens was supposed to go to Whitmer School to make arrests. Yes, sir.
So it was not Judge Parker then who sent?
No. Judge Parker didn't come into Arkansas until 1876.
It was the federal commissioner from Van Buren.
I've got the name somewhere, but I don't recall it right off the top of my head.
Is it Story?
You guys? I think it would have been, it could have been Story.
It would have been Story.
Would have been Story? Okay.
I don't know who the commissioner was.
No, I don't either. The biggest commissioner I'm aware of was Stephen Wheeler, but that was under Parker. Yes, sir.
As Marshal Owens' great-great-grandson, I feel compelled in this little debate to point out, even in some of the things you were saying here this afternoon, federal marshals executed warrants in the Indian territories on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
So the marshals alone were not an act of provocation. Now, that being said, when I started looking into this, because this nice lady introduced me to this part of my family history, I looked at that and I said, Mary Beck is dead, and a whole bunch of people on this posse have a last name of Beck. That doesn't seem like a really good idea to me. And I could, just reading that part of the history, I said, well, I'm not sure that it was going to go really well for Zeke Proctor if they had arrested him.
No.
I'm not sure he would have made it all the way back, you know.
Probably not.
Yeah.
And the other part is, when they rode up with Becks in the posse, there was also other Becks around that school.
Already.
It was not just the posse there. There was other Becks there. So you had Proctors and Becks. Somebody's going to kill somebody. And they did. Yes, ma'am.
Where is the school where the trial took place?
Catherine?
Whitmire School. Where is Whitmire?
We're working on it.
Westville.
Well, I've been there.
Have you?
It's in the middle of a field. There's nothing there.
There's nothing left.
Pardon me?
Christie, across where the Whitmire Cemetery is at.
Yeah.
Where the old Whitmire plantation street.
Okay.
She's one of the landmarks.
Over dinner last night with Catherine, I was saying the two buildings I would like to see re-erected in the Cherokee Nation would be Ned Christie's fort, because that story just fascinates me, and the Whitmer School. That was the biggest loss of life for the Marshals. I'd love to see the Cherokee Nation rebuild them.
And the back mill.
I didn't hear you.
And Hildebrandt back mill.
Yeah.
The mill is still standing.
The mill is standing, but it's more tilting than standing. But
Held up by tables.
yep. Hi.
Whitmire School wasn't too far from the Beck School on Beck Herrick. And the mill has been taken down, most of it. And it's been logged by number to be resurrected again. My grandmother was a niece of Polly Beck. My great-grandmother.
Okay.
And there was a lot of Becks. That was a huge family.
Yes, there was.
I go to the Beck Cemetery every year, and it's a pretty big family.
Yeah, there was a lot of them, and I think they were all at that.
When they came over on the trail, they brought a lot of slaves with them, and most of them are buried in the Beck.
And I think they were all at that school that day. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I'm Max Scraper, great-grandson of Captain Archibald Scraper, foreman of the jury.
I heard you were going to be here, and I didn't know if I wanted to come after that.
Anyway, do you know of any pictures aftermath of on Whitmire porch?
No. I would love it. I've never seen them. I've been researching the Marshals for 30 years. I've never run across one. I'd love to have a picture of Joe Peavy. I'd love to have a picture of Jacob Owens. Because obviously I'm researching the Marshals.
Right.
But I didn't hear you, ma'am.
There's a picture of Jacob Owens.
Where is it? Because I think I've seen it once.
I've got it. I'm Jacob Owens' great-great-granddaughter.
Hi, I want to talk to you afterwards. Fantastic. We were really hoping that from you descendants that we could teach you a couple things today that you didn't know about this event, but also we want to go to school on you guys. There's probably more experts in here than there is here. Yes, ma'am.
I want to know if you know where Jacob Owens is buried.
No.
You do not.
No. Is he in the Fort Smith Cemetery?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. But I'm sure he was probably, I don't know if he was buried around here or whether they took him back to Van Buren.
No one knows. No one
Yeah, I can't find out either.
He's buried near Cincinnati, Arkansas, but I don't know. You know.
Well, his wife lived in Fort Smith.
No.
Was it Van Buren?
Closer to Rogers, and no one knows where she's buried either.
There's so many unmarked graves I've been looking for. My son's wife is a descendant of Heck Bruner, who was a marshal who died in the line of duty. We can't find his grave either.
This is a line of Becks right here, so be careful.
Well, between him and them, I'm in trouble.
Obviously, we can't shoot, so you're all right.
Yeah, did you search them all before they came in?
Well, we have a Marshal president here. No.
Pardon me?
Well, we have a Marshal president here.
That's what I just hollered at him. Did you search all these folks first? Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
This is the great-grandson of Paul. Oh, back here. This is Elsie.
Fantastic. Glad you're here.
We're all the grandchildren. But I want to know how was Zeke Proctor? I thought he was pardoned by the president.
I've heard that story.
Catherine and I were talking about that last night at dinner too.
They make comments that there was a treaty between the federal government and Zeke Proctor.
I've heard that. So the only individual the federal government made a treaty with, but I don't know.
I don't know, and
Delano Waldman's mother used to have that paper treaty.
Pardon me, sir?
Delano Waldman's mother used to have that paper treaty.
Really?
She was a little girl, stood at the end of Zeke Proctor's bed the night he passed away. And Zeke was telling her about the Wolfords in the cave, take care of the Wolford boys, because he's hiding people out the backside of his property.
did you actually see the treaty paper?
Yes, I did.
You did?
In about 66.
Okay.
The last time I seen it. It was the first time I seen it, last time I seen it. I was like 11 years old.
Do you know where it is now?
No. Delano's gone, his mother's gone.
That's a shame that artifacts like that disappear, because that type of thing can change history if we can prove it. I've never seen any proof.
Because the Cherokees dropped all the charges, the government dropped all the charges.
I don't know why there'd be a treaty.
It didn't happen.
Yeah, I don't understand the treaty part of it, to be honest.
Plus, Proctor never ran around just killing people like a soldier would. So I don't know why there would be either, but if you say you saw it, I believe you.
Yes, there was.
The question is, why was it executed?
There had to be a treaty between him and for Archibald and for Foreman. It was to Zeke Proctor, but dismissed. Everybody was involved.
Okay, maybe that, instead of a treaty, maybe that was just the paper of dismissing charges against everybody.
Yes.
Is that possible?
It was an actual treaty. It had treaty wrote on top of it to Zeke Proctor.
Really? Oh, I'd love to see that, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely.
You want to hang that sucker in a museum, don't you? I'll bet you do. Now, is that in the museum or in your basement?
It depends on who gets it first.
There you go. Anybody else?
Were there several heirs that were from different names involved with this, so that because there were marriages with others that we don't know about, or no? Probably.
I think mainly it's the Proctors and the Becks.
Yeah.
And for several reasons. One was over Mary, Polly, but another one was Proctors were on the Union side of the Civil War, Becks were on the Confederate side, and you're only talking 5 to 7 years after the Civil War. Tensions were still pretty high. And Zeke Proctor, if you see pictures of him, he's always wearing his Union jacket and a brace of guns reversed in his holsters. So he's bragging that he's a Union soldier, and down in Confederate land, sometimes that may not be the wisest thing. But he held his ground pretty well. Yes, sir.
My name is Lionel Owens, and I'm like a great-nephew of Jacob G. I'm a retired military officer, and I wanted to know how you knew that, I knew Jacob G. was a Confederate military member, but all the records that I've seen indicate that he was enlisted, highest rank up to sergeant, except for one eyewitness account of a guy named Bracken, who was part of the posse. Eugene Bracken, I think was his name. It's like a 10-page document that gives pretty detailed information about the incident.
I got it from...
He called him a major, and throughout...
Yeah, that's one that I saw.
I was just wondering how you knew he was a...
And I've also seen it, I think it was the Van Buren paper, in 72 or 73 when they were discussing this incident. And there may have been something also on the floor of Congress that was discovered. I was going to write a book on the Goingsnake, Owens, Peavy, and everybody. And I had a stack of papers probably about yay high until June of 2011 when my house burned down. Most of my files survived because they were in metal cabinets, but I had 3 files that I was working on books. The Goingsnake was one of them. And the other 2 were deputy marshals, and those were lost. The 3 most important that I considered, because I had them by my easy chair where I did my writing, and they were lost. So I have the source references at home, but to try to rebuild that whole thing would probably take me another 30 years. And I don't think I got that much time. Ma'am?
Well, I've read many accounts of this because being related to the Becks, because of my always having an interest in restoring the old Beck mill. And all of everything I've ever read says Zeke Proctor had a treaty.
Yeah.
But I don't know where that originated from. But I also
I don't either.
read many times where it said that the chief Lewis Downing, I believe at that time, sent a delegation to Washington, and that's why they established it. Why?
Well, that's why all the charges were dropped, because the Cherokees and the federal government started talking instead of shooting.
In Washington?
Yeah.
Well, because Zeke Proctor was supposed to have been one of them that went up there. The Becks went. A number of them went up there about establishing a court.
Well, I know Joe Peavy gave testimony in front of Congress over this. Yeah, a lot of them were subpoenaed by Congress to travel to D.C. Peavy had to appear twice to give evidence, and I'm sure a lot of the other survivors did too. This was a big deal, and today this would be just massive deal if that type of loss of life happened now. Yes, sir.
I thought something you said was interesting. There was no charge of manslaughter, but there was also no prison. What would you do with the person that you convicted of manslaughter? Murder, you're going to hang them, probably.
Yep, probably.
For manslaughter, what are you going to do with them?
They'd probably be taken home under guard for
And you're going to have them
3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, years. I don't know.
But that's a good point. And that's probably why he made the national prison later. Hi. Hopefully I'm doing good, but probably you need to ask that guy more how I'm doing than me.
We need to move this on because we have one more speaker, and we're going to take this group to lunch at Owens School, which is a one small room schoolhouse that's been refurbished, and you'll kind of get an idea of what our author here was talking about. It's a one room school. So
that's where we want to pick all your brains.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
But let's give him an applause here.
Appreciate it. Sorry I ran over.
Very good. No, that's this stuff here. You could build a campfire and just keep going on and on because this is good stuff.
Grab mine. That's it.
On the council, we had Barbara Starr Scott back there, and I sat close to another guy named Woody Proctor, direct descendant of Zeke Proctor, dressed like him. If you'd see Woody Proctor, right, Barbara Malvina, you'd think you'd see a reincarnated Zeke Proctor walk through that door. Boots always, blue jeans, black vest, mustache, black hat, and a knife. Always, always, always. But having said that, I was wondering why sometimes we would disagree. And they would look at each other like they really didn't like each other. But we got things done. We've come a long ways here. But on to our next speaker here. U.S. Marshal update. We're very fortunate to have the Honorable Jim Spears, Sebastian County Circuit Judge, Chairman, U.S. Marshal Museum. Let's give him a warm applause.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here in OCO. I think that's the word we use over here. I am very happy to be here today, and I have with me Robert Young, who is the chairman of our Marshals Museum Foundation. They're the ones that are charged with raising the money to build this museum. And while I'm here, I brought some pictures, not as big as I had hoped, because Catherine said people have been asking her, well, where is this museum? What's it going to look like? Well, it's going to be on the banks of the Arkansas River, next to the Garrison Avenue Bridge is the closest reference point that I could give you. It's going to be some 50,000 square feet. It's going to be a world-class museum that you can all be very, very proud of. One of the stories that we're going to tell there involves the Goingsnake. This is one of our interactive exhibits. This is a Whitmer School, a representation of it. It's going to have all kinds of bells and whistles when it's built. And you go in there, there's Zeke's picture right there. It's going to be projected on the top onto the face of the museum. Go in there, there's going to be some interactive exhibits about what happened. You can make your own mind up after you hear it. What that's all going to be, I'm not real sure yet, but it's going to be a central part because that story tells the story of the jurisdiction of the federal courts and the United States Marshals in Indian Territory probably better than any other story, unless it is Ned Christie. And we'll address that one as well, I'm sure. But this is one of the galleries that's going to be in this Marshals Museum. I want to invite you all to be with us tomorrow, and I'm not going to speak very long because we have been going long here. I want to invite you all tomorrow at 11 o'clock at the site of the museum. We're going to be dedicating the cornerstone to our Hall of Honor. The Hall of Honor will honor all of the deputy marshals that have been killed in the line of duty since the formation of the United States Marshal Service in 1789 when President George Washington signed Senate Bill number 1. There have been about 250 marshals killed during that period of time. About a little short of half of them were killed in Indian Territory during the time of Judge Parker's court from about 1871 till statehood in 1907. Judge Parker died in 1896. It was a wild and woolly place with a lot of jurisdictions overlapping. People don't understand when I say people, not you folks, you're the descendants of many of them. But people don't understand about the overlapping jurisdiction and the limitations of jurisdiction, of who would be the subject of an arrest by the U.S. Marshals and who would be the subject of arrest by the Cherokee Line Horse or whatever back in the day. And those disputes, as you can see in our discussion today and from hearing from our Marshal today, are ongoing. Little has changed. In fact, I saw in the news not long ago where a murder case was reversed in Oklahoma. Why? Well, they tried its murder case in Oklahoma court. Oklahoma court didn't have jurisdiction. It was a case between a white victim and a Cherokee or a whatever tribe it was, perpetrator, or the other way around, I'm not sure. Guess who has jurisdiction? The federal court. It has not changed. That just astounded me that we still have that distinction, and it has to go back to that. So anyway, we're building this museum. This is our Hall of Honor, what it may look like. We're dedicating the cornerstone. It's not really a cornerstone, folks. It's taller than I am. It's a massive rock is what it is, quarried from I think the hills of Oklahoma. So please be with us tomorrow. We would love to have you. We're going to be very proud of this museum. It's going to be something that will tell your story, as well as the story of the Marshal Service and the story of the entire history of the United States through the prism of the Marshal Service and our constitutional development as a modern nation. So please be with us tomorrow. I am very pleased to be here with you, and thank you very much for having us.
Hello again. For those of you if I didn't introduce myself earlier, my name is Catherine Foreman-Gray, and I'm a History and Preservation Officer with Cherokee Nation. The importance with the Goingsnake Massacre was this really was the what did it mean to be a citizen of the Cherokee Nation at that time? Kesterson was just not any white man coming into the territory. He was an intermarried white to a Cherokee citizen. So he was subject to the laws of the Cherokee Nation at that time. So in our eyes, in the Cherokee Nation's eyes, the federal government should have never been involved with this, with any of this going on here in the Cherokee Nation. So that's where you kind of get two sides, and that definitely that jurisdictional conflict that was happening between not only the Cherokee Nation but all of the Indian tribes here in Indian Territory, and that court in Fort Smith. So that was one of those issues that was really brought about with the Goingsnake Massacre is what did it mean to be a citizen of the Cherokee Nation when it came down to intermarried whites, because they were not
White.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, they were not just any other white people coming in to the territory. So I do want to invite everybody. We are taking this over to Owen School. It is directly across from the Cherokee Heritage Center, and so that'll be a great opportunity for everybody to chat and talk family histories. And everybody in here is invited to go over there, and we are catering a lunch, and so that's going to take place at Park Hill Community Center. It's the old Owen School, and that's directly across the street from the Cherokee Heritage Center. So with that, I'll go ahead and close unless you guys have any other questions for us? No? All right. Thank you.